Okay, colleagues.
Okay, let's go.
Give up on people.
Good evening, members of council, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting of the Town of Pelham P&P meeting to order. It has been moved by Councillor Durley that the agenda for the June 19th, 2017 regular meeting of committee be adopted. Are there any amendments to the motion? Councillor Ribbiak.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder whether we can find an opportunity somewhere in the agenda to talk about Balfour Street and the opening thereof.
Balfour Street?
Balfour. Discussion of a culvert.
Okay. I don't know if that's new business, old business.
I don't know either.
Okay.
We'll find a place to put it, we can talk about it when we get there.
You're going to move that, we talk about Balfour Street and the culvert, okay? Councillor Kurt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since we're going to talk about a culvert on Balfour, maybe we add Poth to that and get an update from our director on the construction on Poth and how the engineering's going and what we're looking at there.
Okay, so we want Balfour culvert and Poth update. How's that? Can we put it all into one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Durley?
Mr. Mayor, I'm thinking that that would be more appropriate at the Committee of the Whole, because that would come through in a report from Public Works and/or, planning, and I don't think at the policies and priorities that really is matters pertinent to policies and priorities, just my opinion.
Councillor Ribbiak?
I don't know how Councillor Kersey feels about it, but I think there's a policy element in that, in that discussion, at least in terms of the extent to which it might be instructive in giving us possibly some future direction.
Okay, so let's vote on whether we add it or not, and then if we add it, we talk about it. I think it's also probably, our next meeting isn't until the 24th of April, so I think the councillor, April, the 20th.
That's so long.
Sorry, I know the meeting's been long, but it's not been that long. The 24th of July, so I think more than a month away. Call a question on the amendment. All those in favor? Any opposed? The amendment carries.
Start doing this, I'm gonna start doing it.
Going to call a question on the motion as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries as amended. Thank you. Next is disclosure of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Do any members have any conflicts of interest they need to disclose? Can that be so noted that there are none? Now we move to Town of Pelham Annual Health and Safety Policy Statement. And it's been moved by Councillor Kersey that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend to Council approve the Town of Pelham Health and Safety Policy Statement, and that the CAO take the actions necessary to communicate this statement to all Pelham staff in accordance with the Occupational Health and Safety Act of Ontario. Questions, comments? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Don't want to get into wordsmithing, but I do think a significant change that should be made here is when we refer to illness, it should be work-related illness, not necessarily illness that is acquired outside of work. I mean, really, what we were talking about is trying to protect
Councillor.
our workers against work-related illness. So such as exposure to toxins, unhealthy work environments and all that might precipitate illness, as opposed to someone developing lung cancer because they smoke too much.
Okay. Again, so you're saying, so for example, we are committed to continuous improvement to the protection of our workers against work-related illness and injuries.
Correct.
That's what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you want to hear from, I presume Ms. Gilbert authored the policy? Ms. Gilbert?
Through you, sir. Actually, no, I did not. This is really an extension of the policy that we just approved annually, year over year. So I'm actually going to defer this to our town clerk, Ms. Bizzato, because I believe she was the one that put this on the agenda.
Ms. Bizzato?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is what has been endorsed by the Health and Safety Committee as the annual policy, but the councillor's comments certainly are well taken, and I will I will take that back to the Joint Health and Safety
Yep.
Committee with
Let's
that
send it back.
recommendation to bring forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so where does that leave it? Do you want council to approve it, or do you want council to
You could
refer it
approve
back to the?
You could approve it, it is up to council to approve it as a policy, and I will take the information back to the Health and Safety Committee as their coach representative.
So you'll be meeting before the 24th of April or the
Yes,
24th of
or-
July?
Yes. We'll meet
All right, so, Counselor, will you put that forward
Yes,
as a amendment?
yes, I will, Mr.
Okay, so it's work-related
Work
illness?
related.
All those in favor of the amendment? Thank you. Any opposed? None. Others to the motion, Counselor Papp?
No, just to pick up on Councillor Kersey, that we make sure that there is legislative reference to that type of definition, that it concurrently meets that. Because he's right, if someone has a heart attack, so I just want to be legally clear.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Call the question as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried, and we look forward to that coming to council and see what the committee thinks. It's been moved by Councillor Kersey that council accepts the minimum attendance policy and recommends it be approved at the next regular meeting of council. This is regarding the fire attendance policy 2017. I would ask that those words be put into the motion. Questions, comments? Pardon? Questions, comments with the policy? Well, just minimum it should be a minimum fire attendance policy. Just a quick question for the chief. Chief, how does this compare with other companies across Niagara, et cetera? Is this sort of the standard, the 40%?
Mr. Mayor, basically, yeah, 40% does come out to about an average. Some of them do it a little bit differently. Some use a higher number but allow for holidays and work-related. We just go 40% across the board regardless, and it's a lot easier to average it out.
Okay, so it's sort of like, is it like our sick policy where you say, if it's bigger than that or larger than that, then it becomes an issue that you deal with the employee with or the part-time employee with. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that what I'm reading and how you deal with it?
Yeah, the general basis of this is that we are mandated through province to meet minimum hours for training and to keep our skill sets up for responses. If we allow people to fall below that 40%, then their training and their skill sets suffer, and then it puts the greater population at risk. So we kind of set that guideline to maintain those training guidelines.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Councillor Papp?
Just quickly through to the chief, this is 40% of annual training hours? Is it like a congregate number that you gotta meet, like, so I gotta have 400 hours, or is it 40% of each month? I'm just,
It's through, Mr. Mayor, it's through a roll call. So
okay,
there's X number of training sessions in a
Right.
year, you need to come to 40% of them.
need to be there, 40% of those throughout the year.
Yes.
Okay, I'm clear.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any others? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. It's been moved by Councillor Kersey that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend the council approve the fire remuneration policy 2017. Questions or comments? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the chief, just for information. I'm assuming that members are kept apprised of the number of points that they've accumulated?
Chief?
See, Mr. Mayor, yes, we keep a matrix, and it's to them personally. We don't post it because it's personal information, but each firefighter is kept notified of their.
Okay, you've anticipated my next question to you, Mr. Mayor. So it's not posted publicly, but they're aware of it, and there's an opportunity, obviously, for them to question, challenge, if they think that's wrong. Good, thank you. Those are my
Okay,
questions.
great. Thanks. Questions? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just again, a bit of wordsmithing. My thought when I read this was that perhaps it's better to lay down the standard things first and then the exception second. So like your second bullet point, for example, is you get 4 points for training which is pre-approved that goes beyond the outside outside the normal. So my suggestion was that you talk about the norms and then bring in the stuff that's outside the
You're talking
norm.
about the ordering of it.
It's just the ordering. Maybe I'm
Okay,
being
maybe
picky,
the
I'm
chief
trying
can
not
look
to
at
be,
the,
but
look at the ordering.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
sorry, Mr. Mayor.
I guess my question, Chief, I didn't get a chance to look at the existing policy. How does this compare with the current system?
This actually has been a policy that I've had in place for, since I came on, but it isn't an official
Okay.
a policy approved by council, that's why I brought it here. We've been following these guidelines for 5 years now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That was my second question. What do the service members think about it? So they've obviously think it's fine if it's been in place for 5 years and tried and true, so thank you. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. It's been moved by Councillor Kersey. The P&P committee received the report outlining the need to update the town's record retention bylaw and record management policy, and that the bylaw be presented to council upon approval of by the municipal auditor to provide for the retention of records by the town of Pelham, and the records management policy be recommended to council for approval. Questions or comments? Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very brief question, more for information. It's an extensive schedule of retention, and the one phrase that I didn't understand was superseded. Perhaps the clerk could explain what that means?
Madam Clerk?
Certainly through you, Mr. Mayor, superseded would be if there is, for example, a policy and a new policy is enacted which rescinds the old one, then it would be superseded. So you would be able to destroy the old one once it meets the superseded plus.
Oh, I see. Otherwise, it stays in place until that such time.
Correct.
I see.
Well, it wouldn't stay in place, it'd stay in the records, right? Wouldn't stay in place because the new policy would be
It
in
would
place?
stay in the records.
It would
That's
just stay in the records.
Okay, thank
So we
you.
don't need to know it, two things removed. Thank you. Others? I'm pleased that, Madam Clerk, that you're recommending that this be considered by the, I guess, the municipal auditor, that's like Deloitte, et cetera. It's interesting, other organizations have looked at their record retention policy, and it's met the ire of the community because are you trying to hide records, et cetera? So it's good to have an authority to come to us and say, this is the policy, et cetera, and it makes sense. So I'll be pleased to hear the suggestions of the auditor. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Durley, be it resolved that P&P Committee received the Public Works Report speeding complaints update June 2017 for information. Questions, comments? Councillor Durley, you want to start off?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Excessive speeds on town roads has been a concern for many years, and studies have been ongoing for just as long. We're experienced paralysis by analysis here, I think. We just keep talking about it and we don't take any action. So, it's something that we need to do. I noticed in front of Glen A. Green School now the poles are back up, which is a traffic calming, and that seemed to work last year up until the snowplows came into service and the chicane. We've tried different things. So, like for example, Hurricane Road has been ongoing for who knows how long. I can't remember it not being an issue. Also Pancake Lane, it's been talked about, and petitions have come forward. Nothing has been done. So we need somehow to really take action, and to take action quickly on these things. Traffic calming is a necessity before somebody does get seriously injured. Because in my the last campaign for running for council on Pancake Lane, I was told there a lady in a wheelchair was just clipped minor by a car coming over, and these things are very serious. So I urge staff I notice in the report that the reports will be coming back to us. I hope they come back quickly, and I hope there's some positive and some actions that can be taken very quickly. And that's my spiel for the speeding thing.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Others? Councillor King.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just add to Councillor Durley's comments. There was recently an accident on Hurricane Road, and I heard from several residents along there, but one gentleman in particular, his issue, in addition to the speeding on Hurricane Road, is really being pushed forward because of the additional traffic lights on Highway 20. And we know that there's that bottleneck on Highway 20, and so people are turning right off 20 and are just booting it up Hurricane Road to Pelham so they can bypass all of that. So I think that as the population grows, the traffic continues to grow on Highway 20, this situation is going to get worse and worse on Hurricane Road. And his, I'm not sure whether it was he or someone else that I was speaking to that made the recommendation that there be no right-hand turn from Highway 20 onto Hurricane. Anyway, I'll just add that for the minutes. Thank
you.
you.
Others? Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to commend staff on an excellent report. It's annotated, it's well laid out, well thought out. Actually, a really good report. I think what we're all
Exceptional,
holding our
yeah.
breath for is the conclusions. Like, we need now to hear the report on when, where, why, and how.
Yes.
We've got the data. I'm echoing my other colleagues. We need action now as soon as possible. So I look forward to a report summarizing the actions that are going to be taken by Public Works over hopefully at the next council meeting.
Thank you. Others? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment about Canberra Road. And unlike my colleagues, I'm waiting to hear what the recommendation is going to be. What's missing, I won't say it's missing from the report, that's probably wrong. What isn't mentioned is our, how to put this, our expectation that Canberra Road has a particular role to play in the town in terms of its being an attractive route, something that will be of interest from a touristic perspective, could add in that way. It's not mentioned here, so I don't know whether that wouldn't, if taken into consideration, have an impact on whatever the decision is with regard to Canberra Road. So I'm just mentioning that so that it can be.
I'm not sure I follow, Councillor. I apologize. So you're suggesting that because of the rolling nature of Canberra Road, because of the attractiveness of some of the houses on it, etc., Ridgeville, that
we would probably want to consider it the kind of road that you would want to travel slowly on.
okay, so that should be another sort of factor in it.
It should be a fact that
Okay.
is mentioned in it in order to be considered.
Okay. I think just to that, we have had discussions and plans, I think, in terms of the what's it called, the downtown master plan.
That's right.
Is that what you're gonna say?
That's what I was just gonna say.
That we plant more trees on Canberra Road and line that road. And actually, although they may not be great for the road surface with the leaves, depending on the type of tree, but that some studies have shown that having more trees closer to the road actually causes people to slow down. I think about driving on certain roads, Maple Street, when you get into the treat area, or some parts of, College Street, Emmett, although people speed on those. You almost, Sulphur Springs, et cetera, you slow down, sort of thing. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess the alternative potential for Canberra, the one that we probably don't want to contemplate, is that we'd plan to go through it, widen it, put in sidewalks, make it easy for people to use. It's referred to here as a collector road. That's not what we want for it. So anything that we do that kind of keeps its character as more of a lane than it is a road, frankly, is to the benefit of the town, I would think. So again, that's the only reason I want to mention that. It isn't mentioned here, and I think that probably is a factor it should be in considering what should be done, whether it's trees or anything else, though I like the idea of trees, in controlling traffic on Canberra.
Okay, thank you. Others? So staff heard that. I think they'll consider it in the sort of the makeup of the road, not only the use, the utility of it, but also the aesthetics of it. I was quite taken aback. I mean, the report is excellent, but I was quite taken aback with the speeds on Canberra. Those are the 85th percentile, eastbound speed, 88 kilometers per hour. Wow.
Maximum speed.
That's huge and it's crazy. And then percentage of vehicles over the speed limit. Am I reading that correctly? 92% of the vehicles are over the speed of 50, is that correct? Madam Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Going eastbound? Yes.
Yeah, and the average speed going eastbound, westbound, 72 in a certain section, 67 eastbound. So people going up the hill are speeding, I mean, it's 60 going down, 59, but going up it's 67. Is there something about that? Do we, it doesn't make sense.
You might have seen the other observation that on most assessments so far, we found that eastbound traffic is always going faster than westbound. in the
What's that
same
mean?
location.
I'm not going to say what I'm
The rotation of the earth?
No,
I
no,
don't know. The one point that struck to me as odd, Madam Director, was that the highest speed, the maximum speeds on both eastbounds were exactly the same. 175.41. I can't believe somebody was going 175 kilometers an hour.
Against Glenn, the second. It's unbelievable. Testing it as an F1 course.
Is that an oddity that they're both the same?
That's an oddity,
That's
Through
rare.
you, Mr. Mayor, not necessarily. This is collected over several days, so the data speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're not necessarily just outliers.
And the other is the same on Hurricane. It's the same. The eastbound speeds are the exact same in both sections. 172.19 and 172.19. Maybe I don't know.
So if you were caught on a major highway.
Well, you'd be
seized.
it'd be beyond seized, like 173 kilometers an hour on that road. But you said that's in the middle of the night. Do you have the time stamps on
Through
those?
you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they're all timestamped, but they were all through.
I guess so that leads to the question of whether the raw data can be shared with the police. And can we catch those people that are going 172 kilometers an hour?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have a few ideas internally because of staff knowing the neighborhood of where the speeding might be coming from. So we have already shared that information, but we'll continue to share, we can share this data with the police as well. And
It'd be important to share that data with the police. And I do want to say that the Niagara Regional Police Service has been very responsive when the emails, and it's the next item, but when the emails were sent in to the district commander, they immediately sent folks out to investigate. But I guess just quickly to Councillor Kersey's and Councillor Durley's or Councillor Ribbiak, sorry, there will be further reports, recommendations coming forward. You're just you want to give us this taste of the problem, and you're going to be coming forward with additional recommendations. Is that correct?
through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. To start things with a level playing field, we had old technology to measure speed that included a sign that flashed your speed, and we found some of the speed measurements were skewed because people knew what they were driving, and some intentionally drove faster, and it didn't give us a true indication. So we went to the new technology that we bought last year, and we had to revisit, recognizing, yes, that some we know are speeding, but this gives us really hardcore data into terms of which direction. When it comes down to actually considering calming measures, and we're looking at road allowance, posted speeds, sidewalks, ditches, these are all things that pose safety risks too when we're talking about speeding. We need that detailed data, so we had to go back. We'll go back now. We have already started looking at some of the measures that could be incorporated, but those would all involve capital. So we'll come back, if I'm taking this direction, as I think that you're indicating, we'll come back with an idea of what that capital might be and how that might unfold in the future.
Okay, thank you. I think, just to round it out, I'm hopeful some of that might be inexpensive capital, like paint. So we'll see what you come back with, but there may be other things that we need to do, so look forward to that. Anything further on this? Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. I know that's sorry, I should apologize again. It's a simplistic view, but in some cases it may work. Moved by Councillor King that the Policy and Priorities Committee recommend to Council that Council receive the correspondence from residents Hurricane Road regarding speeding on the municipal street, and staff be directed to take consideration these concerns on the study being undertaken relating to speeding within the town of Pelham. Any further comments? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. This one was a little bit of latitude, Council. There's no resolution for it. Okay. This is something that a designer in downtown Fonthill asked about. He's designed a number of changes in buildings, etc. And this is regarding parking on Pelham Town Square, both down at the area in front of the Catholic Church, but also around the I know, the bend as well. And what I suggested, there may be some, just to look at it again. I know we looked at it a bunch of years ago,
Long time ago.
but maybe it'd be worthwhile to take a look at, is there a way to increase parking on Pelham Town Square? So the reason it's here is that I was hopeful that we could simply direct staff, and I know it's never simple if we direct staff to do something, they study it, but to take a look at the idea of perhaps lining the parking in front of the church, or seeing if there can be parking on Pelham Town Square on the curve. And there was a report that was done, maybe an update of that report, et cetera. So just looking for council to our committee to just make a resolution to direct staff to investigate this and report back to us perhaps in the fall about that. So Councillor Papp, you'll move that?
I'll move that.
Okay.
We re-examine, reconsider the expansion of parking in Pelham Town Square.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else to that? Councillor King?
Well, not that that needs to be seconded, but if it would, I would second it, because I also think that there is speeding along Pelham Town Square, which will only get significantly worse as East Fonthill opens up. And what I find now, because there is 2-hour parking on the north side of Pelham Town Square, that it slows the traffic down considerably.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? So the resolution is to just ask staff to put together a report, perhaps a little bit of an update on parking on Pelham Town Square. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, and here's another one. Balfour Culvert and Poth Street update. Councillor Ribbiak, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This arises out of the recognition that the Balfour Street culvert has been awarded as a $30,000 capital expense. And it just raises the question how that culvert could be worth $30,000 when, and I'm sure Councillor Kersey will be asking the question about Poth because he raised it, but other bridges as well, or other viaducts that cost a good deal more. So just wondering what, to bring into a policy discussion, what's the policy basis around making that decision?
Okay, Ms. Weens, can you update us on that culvert?
Yes,
And the
Mr. Mayor,
policy
through
discussion.
you, the drainage superintendent put a request out for a tender for replacement of two 6-foot culverts on Balfour Street. They are starting to collapse, and the farmer who crosses those to access his land last year had requested that those culverts be replaced. They weren't part of a budget, so we put them in the budget this year. And so when we received the tender call, there was a range of prices that we received, and contractor is also similar one who replaced fairly large culverts on the Big Creek Train last year in the golf course. Again, there were some large culverts there that needed to be replaced to keep the drain functioning. So that's how these culverts come to be. They are replaced in accordance with, the engineer's report, and then the benefiting property owners would be
Appropriately
billed
levied.
out to recover the cost. Now, in this case, because this culvert is actually within an unopened road allowance, the cost is borne by the municipality.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarity, so we're not talking about a culvert beneath Balfour, we're talking about access to fields across? So these are culverts as part of the ditching system for Balfour? Is that what we're talking
Mr.
about?
Mayor, through you, these are within a portion of Balfour that's unopened, so it's not a public road. And they do cross the road allowance, but it's not within a publicly traveled street.
Is this the part of Balfour that we are going to open with,
We may well open.
That we
That's
may
correct.
well
It's the
open.
unopened road allowance between Chandler and Weber.
so when it has traffic, does that mean it's going to have a bigger, more expensive culvert? I'm trying to take 30,000 versus $1 million that we've seen in some cases. I'm just trying to rationalize it.
I don't know if, I don't know what the traffic, I think the director indicated it, in this case, it's farm traffic, but I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yes, this would be within
Our
the
director here
area.
is jumping up to answer that.
Jumping up to answer this one. This is in the stretch of Balfour. It's an unopened road allowance, currently Farmers Field.
Right.
And it is part of the area that we would develop as a road should we decide to go down that path. So we have had the discussions that if we do this work now, this culvert installation wouldn't be able to be an engineered structure. So under the Canadian Bridge Code, the structure wouldn't pass as a safe structure to build a road over top of. So we did have some discussions about slowing this one down until it's decided based on the environmental impact study that's being done on Balfour. The major difference is that this is just like a farm crossing in your back field. It's simply excavate, replace the culverts, and place fill over top as much cover as you need to get a tractor across. Entirely different from having to build a roadway with a structure underneath it. Legislation kicks in, engineered design kicks in, waterway permits. Working in the waterway alone costs about $70,000 because you need the permits, you need to de-water, you have to do that in that construction window in the summer. So everything changes when you're talking about a public roadway versus a small farm culvert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what I'm hearing is that all that's needed now is an unengineered pipe, that when or if we open that thing will have to be engineered, and something possibly substantially greater might have to go in at that point. But it's not considered at this point as part of the thinking because they're so vastly different, I guess. I don't know. Help me with this. I think that's what I'm hearing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly correct. So if we are to go ahead with simply reinstating these culverts so that the farmer can continue to use the road allowance for access, then this would suffice. If we are talking about having to build a crossing of a waterway with a public road, then entirely different legislation, Canadian and Ontario legislation kicks in, and the structure has to be able to meet those requirements.
Thank you. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mayor. I have some questions around that. So, in order to put this culvert in on Balfour, despite the fact that we're dealing with a municipal drain and we're gonna be in the water and we're gonna be contaminating the water, we don't have to get permits to dewater and manage the water and all of the same things at the roadway, even though we're doing exactly the same process?
Ms. Weens?
Mr. Mayor, through you, because it is a different process, yes, given the size of the culvert, but under the Drainage Act, there's a different requirements for that. There is a work permit required through the Conservation Authority, but because this is not an engineered design thing, there's just times within the year that they are also restricted to do the work as it relates to fish habitat. So, but it's a fairly straightforward process through the Drainage Act that allows them to do this work in the water.
Councillor Kersey, thank you. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, the double culvert that is on Poth, at the time it was put in, is that not part of a drainage system, or was that not, would that have gone under the significant engineering process that we're talking about doing now? Or was the legislation not in place at that time? I'm just kind of
Do you have an answer for that, Ms. Clemencio?
I can't comment on what was applicable at the time that that structure originally went in, but it is subject to the same waterway restrictions now. Although it's municipal drain, it has sensitivities, so we were flagged early on that the same permitting would be required, and the same restriction for construction, which was what was brought forward in that report.
Thank you. Councillor?
I have one last question. The act, I forget what the reference name is, but it seems to me within the act, there's an allowance for a municipality to make a decision to not go through it as if it were a bridge and engineered structure and, simply replace what's there. Is that not the case, or?
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the Canadian Design Code for Highways and Bridges has two main components. One is about the safety and the engineered safety of the bridge, and one is about the longevity of the bridge. The longevity is what had the flexibility in the clause that we brought forward that said if the owner recognizes that it won't be a 75-year structure, as long as it's acknowledged by the owner, you can go ahead, which is what we've exercised. But the safety portion of it is not an option or a flexible option. I don't think you'd be able to find an engineering firm that would want to go ahead and go against that Canadian code.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to hear this. I think, this will be an issue. We hear about it elsewhere. People talk about, and it was even mentioned as they were looking at our libraries and cemeteries and culverts at the region. So it's something that kind of doesn't, it's one of those that doesn't make sense, so it needs to be explained. So appreciate staff explaining it this evening and councillors raising it. I think whenever the next point is that this comes forward, I think it'd be important to reiterate some of these points to council and to the public so that, again, because you look at it and you say, well, it's a culvert and it's a culvert, like, what's the difference? So we're hearing it's legislative difference, et cetera. So I think it's important to chat about it in terms of the policy and all of that, but it's also very important to communicate that to residents. Anything further on that? Thank you. I think that completes our agenda. So it is in order that it's been moved by Councillor Ribbiak that this regular meeting of committee be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for Monday, July 24th, 2017, following council. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
Thanks for that clarity.